Welcome to Everyday Martial Artist, a weekly podcast where you'll join me, Brian Doucette, as I interview a different martial artist each episode and hear their story. Some guests you may have heard of, and some you probably haven't. Be sure to subscribe where all your favorite podcasts are available. Also visit our website at everydaymartialartist.com. If you're listening for a specific interview, I sure hope you'll stay and check out the other episodes. A very special thank you to Topher Williams for our custom theme music. And now, the newest episode of Everyday Martial Artist. Everyday Martial Artist is brought to you by KOonline.com for all your martial arts needs. Sparring and safety gear, rank belts, uniforms, weapons, patches, and more. Wholesale supplies made by martial artists for martial artists. Visit us today at ko-online.com. Hey, business leaders, want your audience more focused than a monk in a staring contest? Want them grinning bigger than when they found out their in-laws aren't coming for Christmas? Then you need the amazing Arthur Fratelli. Arthur is a TEDx speaker, Last Comic Standing alum, and lifelong martial artist, traveling the country, captivating audiences at conferences, corporate events, and schools. His high-energy keynotes blend failure, focus, and flow with comedy, magic, and jaw-dropping skill. Facts fade, but stories stick, and Arthur delivers a TEDx-worthy experience they'll never forget. Book now at theamazingarthur.com, because your event deserves more energy than a caffeine-fueled ninja. Hello and welcome to Everyday Martial Artist. I'm your host, Brian Doucette, and as we do every week, we're joined by a brand new guest talking about their life and their journey throughout the martial arts and other stuff they're involved in. My guest today is a kickboxing champion, actor, and author. With an extensive martial arts background, he holds black belt level rankings in several arts. Within the world of kickboxing, he's a current IKTA European, International, and Golden Warrior champion in the light heavyweight division. In June, he'll be fighting for the WPKO World Title. In 2022, he co-authored his first book, Full Contact Kickboxing, a complete guide to training and strategies. And in 2023, was inducted into the UK Martial Arts Hall of Fame with the Legend in the Martial Arts Award. He's currently working on his first leading role in an upcoming martial arts action crime drama, The Butterfly, and also holds a bachelor's degree with honors in sports science. Please welcome my guest today, James Turner. How are you doing today, sir?
Hi, Brian. Very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing good. I another one of the weird ones with the time difference, being over in the UK and trying to schedule this. So those are the ones I'm always glad we can make work, because they're always a challenge. And what time is it for you?
Yes, sir. Well, it's we're just after 3 p.m. in the afternoon now. So,
okay,
it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me on your show.
Oh, my pleasure. Seriously. So, and I know you said you're a listener, and you know how we kick it off. So we want to go back to the beginning. We want to know where it all started, where that first interest came from, that first spark that kicked off your martial arts journey.
Yes, sir, very much so. Well, my very earliest memories of martial arts were seeing various depictions of the day in terms of film and TV. You'd see people doing these, acrobatic kicks in combat, and I was very fascinated by, what's that? Of course, a lot of the when I was a kid growing up in the 90s, a lot of the films and TV shows that had already been done in the 70s and 80s were on reruns. I do early on remember seeing David Carradine's portrayal of Kane in Kung Fu. These are all very early kind of planting the seed things. And then I saw the fight scene from the movie as it's known in the States, well, it has historically been known as The Chinese Connection. Yep. I think it's probably more commonly referred to now as Fist of Fury, with Bruce Lee, obviously. And I saw him in the dojo fight scene where he raids the dojo early on in the film and takes out the whole school and the sensei single-handedly. And of course, just his power, his athleticism, screen presence, charisma, you name it, the gamut, basically. I was hooked from that moment on. And I never really looked back before, really coming to terms with the fact at a certain point that first and foremost, I'd have to say I'm a martial artist, so that was really my initial kind of light the fire under my seat there, and I was away,
Nice. How long after that before you actually found your way to some, actual official training? Did you have to convince your parents? How did that happen?
Yeah, it was an interesting, I'd love to say, I just was determined and I begged my parents until they finally relented and took me, but it was a bit of a strange eventuation. I was a bit of a shy kid and a little bit of a loner. I had some good friends throughout my schooling, especially as the years progressed, but all in all, I was kind of either part of a small group or spent a lot of time by myself, and it was me in my own little world. Like I said, I'd found Bruce Lee, and he was my hero of my very, my formative youth, and I was kind of self-educating. I'd bought books, magazines, and kind of this and that, learning the essentials of martial arts off my own back as a kid, which has limited reach in terms of being able to, develop any kind of expertise. So eventually, it was actually my mum who saw an advert for a martial arts school, and it had a picture of Bruce Lee on it. And this was
Nice.
Jeet Kune Do, Kali, Silat, several art school, kind of following the Dan Inosanto kind of blueprint of mixing the Jeet Kune Do with Filipino and Indonesian martial arts that he'd been interested in. And it was in Cornwall. The Sifu was a gentleman named Ian Moody, still a very good friend of mine to this day. Really fantastic martial artist, and gave me a fantastic introduction to what you would call formal learning in the martial arts. So that's where it started for me. And I studied with him until I reached equivalent of black belt level in the martial arts in those particular arts, the Jeet Kune Do, the Kali, the Silat. Got into some competing through working with Sifu Ian as well, through stick fighting in terms of Kali Eskrima competition. And by then, I'd already been bitten by the kickboxing bug, if you will.
Okay.
Because the initial foray into that was being a Bruce fan. My dad had said to me at a certain point, of course, well, there are other martial arts actors as well. You should check those out. So, of course, you did Chuck Norris, the whole gamut. And I came upon Don the Dragon Wilson, and he was the world kickboxing champion. And that's really what opened my eyes to kickboxing. And as well as having designs as a kid on being an actor in martial arts films someday, I also at that point had designs on being a kickboxer, of course. And so by the time I was getting into competition in any respect, I'd already pretty much decided I wanted to be a full contact kickboxer, like the guys that I had seen. So it wasn't good enough to do mixed martial arts or Thai box or whatever else. I wanted to have long pants, kick boots, shin guards, boxing gloves, and the whole hog, so to speak. So that was really my kind of beginning in the martial arts to my eventual kind of, I don't know if you call it a niche, but my particular path in terms of because martial arts, the good thing about it today, of course, as you well know, Brian, is we come from only 50, 60 years ago. It was so dogmatic in that you learn this discipline and that was that. And don't you go and train with anybody else because I might lose your class fee every month, let's say. Yep. These days, we can generally have that intelligent discussion of, sensei, sifu, or whatever. I'm interested in learning this other art. It's on these nights, etc., just so you know, if you've got no objections, I would like to go and study some of this to complement my training here. I generally find that, most good martial arts instructors will be open to that and will understand it. I certainly do with my own students if they want to study something other than just straight kickboxing, which is what I generally teach. So, that was basically how I was able to kind of find my own individual path in the martial arts. I, of course, encourage people to be well-rounded in their martial arts training for the purposes of broad knowledge. And if you had to ever defend yourself, you wouldn't be caught off guard in not having basic skills in various ranges of combat, etc. But of course, I think we all find, the particular arts that we're interested in, we have a knack for and that we like to kind of focus our attention on.
Now, you mentioned your first instructor, Ian, and how he was such a great martial artist and instructor. What are a couple of things that stand out? What do you remember about maybe some of those first few classes that once you got there made you want to keep going?
Well, it's interesting. I think because of the Bruce Lee JKD approach, which was really instrumental, I should say, of course, as well, in developing the attitude of being able to learn different arts, absorb what is useful, reject what is useless. These tenets that we almost take for granted now, but were cornerstone philosophies from Bruce Lee that he was, really against the grain with in his day in the 60s at the time. But the early lessons, really what stood out to me was that simplicity and directness was the cornerstone of what I was learning. You had a fundamental position, a stance. You had quick, efficient techniques in terms of offense, defense, and counter offense. Of course, as a kid, I'm looking at the movies. I'm very interested in learning how to do a spinning hook kick and everything else with, and which, don't get me wrong. I mean, even today as a kickboxer, I like to do that kind of stuff as well. But I always impress upon everybody that that's behind a foundation of solid fundamentals. You've got to be able to throw, first of all, you need to be able to throw a side kick. Mm-hmm. Then you need to be able to throw a hook kick. And then you can learn, those are the prerequisites to being able to develop a good spinning hook kick, for example. So the early lessons to me, I remember Sifu Ian, he was calm and very, let me say, direct with his instruction. And yet he was able to relay the subtext of what it was that we were doing. So he could explain how to actually perform a basic punch and yet convey behind that punch the idea that there was the potential for several other punches, combinations, defensive maneuvers all within, say, one punch. So that was one thing that even at a young age, I picked up on. These individual techniques I was learning, they were part of a more cohesive whole. And I think that really, once you develop proficiency in a martial art, that's really what's happening. It's action, reaction. The individual techniques are not as important as what the individual can create in and of himself. I think I'm actually paraphrasing Dan Inosanto with that statement, but that was something that kind of clicked with me early on, I would say.
Nice. And you mentioned you did some early competition. Do you remember your very first time ever competing?
Yes, that's right. So actually, the first competition I did was the Southwest stick fighting competition where I live in Cornwall. It was a Southwest competition between martial artists who had trained in Filipino Cali Eskrima. So basically, it was kind of like a makeshift deal where we'd wear American football equipment combined with, we had shoulder pads, helmets, gloves, just basically having the vital areas protected, essentially. And then we'd have Filipino Cali sticks made of rattan and bamboo, and we'd go at it. And it was kind of structured in a way similar. It was good grounding for me to get into the competition that I was really interested in doing later on, of course, was kickboxing, pro kickboxing. But yeah, we basically fought for a few rounds, and we had the sticks that we would use to block, counter, score points. Obviously, no one was really going to get knocked out with hitting each other with sticks. We were very well protected, we were very well packed in. But so I did 3 of those tournaments. They were on an annual basis, and I won the 3 tournaments in the middleweight and the heavyweight divisions based on their weight divisions that they had. And of course, by that time, I was very much training as a kickboxer with designs on doing that. So I was running in the morning, I was training at night, hitting the bags and this and that. Of course, for those competitions, I was also training in Cali and Eskrima. And then eventually, by the time I was 18, 19, even Ian was aware that I was very keen to move into the competitive kickboxing field, where I lived and still do live in this part of England. It was very difficult to get fights for me because the sport of American full contact karate kickboxing is not as prolific as it used to be. So for the first several years of my pro career, I would be fighting very relatively rarely. I was having to take tough fights because they were the only fights I could get. So my very first pro fight was against a former British champion who was trying to get, I guess, like an easy win because he had lost his last fight. And I won a unanimous decision in that fight. So I was thrust, thank you. Yeah, I was thrust straight into championship level fights, which I've been doing ever since. And I did have to take some divergence and do some K1 and Thai boxing fights at certain times because it was just too difficult for me to get the fights. But eventually I stuck to my guns and stayed true to what I really wanted to do. And there's a whole story behind that, actually, which I'm sure we'll come to in due course with how I got into the IKTA, which is the organization I predominantly fight for now. But I won't run away from the structure of the show.
That's okay.
I can chat.
First of all, that stick fighting competition sounds like fun.
Well, thank you. It was fun. That's right. You don't get hurt. I mean, you've got the sticks on and you've got the equipment on to the point where you really can just go at it. There's no superficial damage in terms of cuts, contusions, or bruises or anything like that. And of course, there's no concussive impact like we have in boxing and kickboxing, which of course is a hot topic these days with, the head trauma and things like that. There's really no damage to speak of. You mentioned it, it's a good point. I can't really think of too many other competitive outlets where you would be, like you say, fighting and hitting someone as hard as you can. And then when you're done, hey, you're all good, buddy. You're both absolutely fine. There's no real risk of any injury to speak of. It was certainly an interesting competitive outlet. Yeah.
Yeah, years ago, my instructor puts on this big tournament every year in Fargo, North Dakota. And for the first few years of the tournament, now he has like a grappling aspect. But for the first few years, he teamed up with a local Okinawan instructor, and we had a bogu, which was basically like they wore the full like metal kendo headgear, full martial arts padding, and boxing gloves, and went full contact. Wow. And my buddy actually knocked someone out in that.
I was going to say, I mean, if your buddy, if he can hit hard enough, there's definitely a possibility. I mean, I mean, it's like that. Obviously, it's the face mesh, isn't it? And the rest of it, it's got like a hood kind of structure to it. That traditional kendo headpiece. So,
but that was fun to watch too. I mean, that was cool. So then after you got your like black belt level with Sifu Ian, so did you go and seek out a specific instructor to train you for kickboxing, or did you kind of do that on your own?
Yeah, I didn't. Locally, there were several martial artists who acted in like a coaching role for me in various respects. I would basically acquire martial artists as friends who would kind of, if they were more experienced in the fight game than me, for example, they would kind of help me in that respect. So whether in like a coaching role, holding pads, sparring with me, getting me sparring partners. I had a couple of people who tried to help in terms of a managerial aspect, trying to get me fights and whatnot. But it was very difficult. And some of the people I was dealing with, they didn't really have the connections, certainly not to be able to do full contact, which of course is only popular now in pockets of the world. Mm-hmm. And a major breakthrough happened to me, happened for me, where I mentioned Don the Dragon Wilson was my initial inspiration to get into kickboxing. Yep. And I had a few key individuals who were also in that kind of category of being my idols, my heroes. And one of them, pretty much at one time there, he was really the only active full contact kickboxing world champion who was fighting on a regular basis and had a career that I could follow. A gentleman in Italy by the name of Massimo Brizzi. And he really fought with that fighting style that I had grown to love. He used his lead leg a lot, the side kick, multiple kicks, hand combinations. He was a southpaw like me, right side forward. And I was following his career. And when he was getting ready to retire, I was in communication with him on Facebook. Even though he didn't speak any English, we would communicate just through Translate and whatnot. And when he was getting ready to retire, he said, "Look, James, I know you love full contact, American kickboxing. I'm getting ready to retire. I'm going to be focused on promoting more. Why don't you come and fight for me?" Nice. So that's basically what I've been doing since. And it's eventuated to the point where the organization that he's the vice world president for, the IKTA, Intercontinental Kick Thai Boxing Association, but it has a focus on full contact largely. I represent the organization here now in England, so we'll get to my book, I'm sure, the Full Contact Kickboxing book. That's obviously endorsed by the IKTA, etc. And it gave me a clear track to be able to compete in, essentially like an MMA fighter who goes to, let's say, the UFC or something like that. Massimo inviting me to fight in the IKTA sanctioned events. I all of a sudden had a route that I could actually pursue full contact rules, professional competition. So I was thrust into a position where I was able to compete more regularly and start moving towards, fighting for the titles that I wanted to and whatnot. And that's basically what I've been doing since. Not only competing, but also promoting full contact kickboxing as in something of an ambassador role through the organization as well, and the various projects I've been doing.
So I'm assuming kickboxing must be bigger in Europe than it is in the US right now.
Yeah, the full contact rules in particular, which is ironic, isn't it? Because, of course, it's essentially an American sport. I mean, I always, describe it to people as, we will often refer to it, if not as full contact, which is what it's widely known as in Europe. Another moniker for it, of course, is American kickboxing, meaning long pants, all kicks above the waist, kick boots, shin guards. And really, I think in the US, sadly, it's at its lowest point in popularity. Yeah. I think somewhere along the line, well, I think it's much more involved than I could probably be able to relay or even have intimate knowledge of. But I think at various points throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s, it reached highs, and then probably through disagreements with, TV providers or whatnot, it would just go away. And I think MMA kind of swooped in where maybe kickboxing wasn't at its high point of exposure. And so MMA now, of course, is the preeminent martial arts, if you want to call it that. And I know it's a whole different conversation in terms of how the virtues of the martial arts are sometimes represented through various combat sports. I know one of your recent guests, one of my all-time heroes, of course, Rick the Jet Rufus. I know you the two of you discussed this at length, the virtues of the martial arts. In the good old days of full contact kickboxing, full contact karate, you would have the two competitors, they'd bow to the referee, they'd bow to each other, and then the fight would start. So you never forgot, even though there were traditional martial artists at that time who would look at kickboxing even and say, "Oh, I don't know about this." The famous story of Ed Parker, of course, told Bill Wallace, "I don't think it's a good idea that you do this, Bill." Remember, Bill relayed that story. But I think it'd be interesting. I think a lot of those people, if we could ask them now, they probably look, in my opinion, of course, I can't speak for anybody else, but I feel like full contact American kickboxing is a nice sport avenue for the traditional martial artists, because not all, but there have been some very famous mixed martial arts fighters or fighters in the various offshoots of combat sports where, they don't represent the virtues of the martial arts in the best way. Right. They're not necessarily the best role models for young people or what have you, the way I was introduced to the martial arts in a very positive sense. So, at a certain point, it's to answer your question, very long-winded, I know, I would say it's more popular in pockets of Europe And like I say, I compete in Italy for the IKTA, and the people who were there, I mean, they're salt, that we say in England, salt of the earth people. You know, the terrific people, virtuous, honorable, just great influences and on their own communities and pillars of their communities. And, you know, the kind of people that I would aspire to try to, you know, emulate myself. Even now as a grown man, I'm a natural hero worshiper, I guess. Yeah, that to me is one of the endearing and enduring qualities of the sport. And you're as familiar with the pillars and the pioneers of the sport as I am. It's the people that create and perpetuate something as much as anything else. You know, we're martial artists, but really our paths in the martial arts have been forged by many of the people, our instructors, or people we saw on TV or in films or whatever. If they make a positive impact on us, of course, our enthusiasm is ensured for years to come, right?
Yep, definitely. And I know they just in the last like 5 years they just started sanctioning kickboxing in Minnesota again. And I'm hoping I need to reach out to the commission, and because my friend runs a commission. I'd be like, hey, let me know when these happen again, because I've only heard of like a couple. But I know there's other organizations, and I know there's rumors of bringing the PKA back and things like that. So
yeah, absolutely, yeah. Well, the IKTA that I'm involved with, they've actually been, I don't want to say it's co-sanctioning, but basically they've both been involved with events. A good friend of mine in Brazil, Lacio Nunes, who's a huge kickboxing enthusiast, he brought Bill Wallace, Joe Corley, and Benny Urquidez to Brazil for his retirement fight last year, which, by the way, he's in his 50s, and he finally had his retirement fight last year, so quite phenomenal. And Massimo Brizzi, my IKTA head, if you will, he was out there too. So they were all together helping put this big kickboxing event on. So I do think, because we're certainly more than ever now a relatively small sport, I think we're kind of banding together, and just for the good of getting it out there and showing people this great martial arts history, that competitive sport history, you know, I think just getting it out there in the public eye again is a good thing, because, you know, I've observed it myself. I've always been like the 80s guy, even though I was born in I was born in 1990 and grew up as a kid, really, and a teenager in the 2000s. Even I've observed that, you know, like TV shows like Stranger Things and Cobra Kai, like 80s culture, it's kind of got this cool factor back again. Things go full circle. Yep. It's like in the 70s, Grease was popular for a while, which was based on 50s rock and roll, right?
Yep. Oh, I love
so
Grease.
I think that there's it's a prime time, I think, where you could look at this cool pillar of 1980s martial arts culture, which was full contact karate, kickboxing. I think it's prime time for it to be, at least give people the opportunity to see it and decide for themselves if they like it. Because I think if they were just exposed to it, they would.
Agreed.
It's just not on TV anymore.
But even on that app, you know, I've talked about this a few times on recent episodes too, is like, you know, the Chuck Norris World Combat League.
Absolutely.
2007, 2008. Why didn't that succeed? I mean, that was on TV.
Yeah.
It blows my mind. That's some of my favorite stuff I've watched on television as far as martial arts goes, and it did not succeed.
It's strange, isn't it? It was slightly restructured. It certainly had its roots in the kickboxing we're talking about, and a lot of those competitors were in it, and they modified it to, as you mentioned, it was each fight was, I think, 1 3-minute round a pop. One fight in kind of like a league style. They at least tried to just restructure it enough that it was short, sweet, and people could just turn on the TV. They'd see a fast fight, all action, and then on to the next thing. But I personally think it's not so much a problem with the product. I think it's always been competing within a market space, and it's just never been able to take flight and spread its wings in the way that it potentially could. Of course, as well as doing the kickboxing book, the instructional book, which has been well received, I'm very honored and appreciative that many of the great champions and pioneers of the sport have endorsed it. We're also doing, I'm also the lead actor in an upcoming martial arts action film called The Butterfly, and the writer-director of the film, Matteo Scarfo, who's very accomplished in his field, he said he wanted to, he recognized my passion for this, and he said, well, let's make the main character in the film, he's a kickboxer in this sport. So even though there's a whole other plot going on where he's involved in crime and he's trying to break free of the clutches of this gang, it's the ever-present element within the film is the fact that he's this kickboxing champion. So that, the modern audience can see, oh, okay, so they've got long pants on, kick boots, and they're kicking above the waist, and it's 2-minute rounds, and they fight for 10 rounds or 9 rounds or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just another way that whatever notoriety I get as a martial artist, as an athlete, to an actor, to an author, at least I can say I'm doing my best to do my bit to promote this sport that I'm very passionate about. And I know, obviously, yourself being from Minnesota, with your martial arts background, you're very familiar with one of my heroes, John Longstreet, and it has a rich heritage in your part of the world as well. So I'm sure you can empathize with my plight, if you know what I mean.
Definitely. And then, another thing you talked about with, television and exposure and stuff is, back when it was popular in the 70s and 80s, most people had 4 channels on their television. And now when you have, when you can choose between 2,000 channels and different shows to watch, it's harder to stand out. But that's where the movie step, hopefully if a movie like this is successful, it'll, like you see, like movies with like the Karate Kid, then suddenly karate became popular and things like that. So they need something like that, and something like that where someone in the movie then will actually be competing. So like if they see you're in the movie and they're like, hey, this guy's in this movie, it's really good, and he's got a match coming up that's going to be on TV, let's watch it. Exactly. So
that's the idea.
Maybe not the best example, but I look at kind of like what's happening in the United States with the WNBA and women's basketball, and what happened with Caitlin Clark. You have this a known superstar that was known and then comes in, and then suddenly it affects the whole league. So if you can have, like I said, a superstar, possibly someone like yourself who becomes very well known, and then that's maybe that, who knows? I mean, we could talk about it all day, and it's all speculation.
Yes, sir. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Brian. I think that's kind of the what you just said is exactly where we're kind of trying to go with it. People can see it in various avenues and make the links, and what that does, of course, it fosters an interest in what you're looking at. Oh, that's that guy from the film, or oh, the guy in the film is the guy from the kickboxing match I saw, or I think I have his book. If people like me and others, if they can kind of keep planting the seed, it may, as you mentioned, there are so many avenues and so many different, everybody's got a channel. Anybody can create an Instagram, a Facebook, a YouTube channel. Yep. There are so many things vying for our attention. It may never be in a position again where Bill Superfoot Wallace is fighting on, ABC or NBC. There was a time there where after Bruce Lee passed away and before Chuck Norris's film career really took off, where Bill Wallace in the Western Hemisphere was probably the most well-known martial artist. He was the world champion and he was on TV. Yeah. It may never be that broadly big again, but at least I think it could establish a strong niche to where if people were interested in it and they wanted to find it, take part, develop a fandom for it, it would be there. Yeah. And you wouldn't necessarily have to trawl through old magazines and look for people like me to tell you, and yourself to tell people all about it. Just make it a bit more accessible would be nice.
I almost hate to say it, but it might take someone like a Dana White who already has the following and be like, all right, there's these 4 guys from the UFC that would probably be good at kickboxing. We're going to put on a kickboxing event, something like that, just to launch it,
just to get it
and get the interest. And then, and now we're going to do this one more time, but now we're going to bring in some up and comers that no one's ever heard of, but we're going to have one of these big names, Anderson Silva's the headline, something like that.
And then it could, that's right. Yeah. And you may well be aware from behind the scenes conversations that I think both of us have probably been party to, where there have been ideas to get former MMA names to compete against some of the kickboxing names in that format. And maybe that would just, at least then you've got the element of familiarity with the MMA fans who would then potentially be more interested in kickboxing as well. So there are all kinds of plates spinning. And, there's obviously karate combat now, which I have described to people as, full contact karate. When it was conceived, you had the champions, Bill Wallace, Joe Louis. Joe Louis really was the guy who really wanted to fight for real, the karate champion who really wanted to do it. Mr. Wallace would be the first one to tell you. He said, look, I was more than happy scoring points with my hook kick and getting out of there. And Joe would say, no, Bill, come on, we're going to do this training for full contact and we're going to compete in it. Myself, and I'm speaking as Joe Louis, of course, but I should make clear, Joe Louis had said that he and like guys like Lee Faulkner and later Mike Anderson, people like that, they were keen to put together an alternative avenue to point karate where you would fight continuously to the knockout. And Bill was saying, Joe, I don't know about that. And Joe said, no, Wallace, come on, you're up. You're our middleweight. And that's how it started. Now, you could look at karate combat and say that that's the traditional martial artist avenue to have a competitive outlet today in the MMA climate. Because back then, what was the pro fight sport? It was boxing.
Yeah.
So that's how full contact karate came about. They were trying to do something like boxing to appeal to the public. So that's how, the sport I'm interested in really came about. So now it's kind of like it's a time capsule, but I believe it also has potential to continue to proliferate because it is very exciting. The rules are exciting. It fosters world-class striking skills in a very accessible format, very visually pleasing format. And as we've discussed, there are so many avenues these days. Well, why not? If there is room for everybody, let's keep the thing going, right?
And I've actually reached out to the 4 league ambassadors from Karate Combat to try to get them on the show, and so far no luck. But I put requests out there for Bass Rutten, George St. Pierre, Lyoto Machida, and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. So I'm hoping one, if not all 4 of them, will say yes and be like, yeah, sure, let's get on there and promote it.
Yeah, that'd be great. Well, again, if they're not willing to, if they're not quite ready to come on to promote Karate Combat yet, well, I'm here promoting American full contact karate kickboxing. So there you go. I'll get in there first, I guess.
Cool. And you mentioned the movie. You talked a little bit about that. Where did the acting bug come from? Did you do theater and stuff as a kid, or how did that come about?
Yes, that's right. I actually, because I was interested in martial arts movies, that was my first foray into martial arts. I was inspired by the movies, as the story goes, right, when I was a kid. And I came from a musical family, as I mentioned to you beforehand off air. So I was always singing and doing things like that when I was a kid. So I had designs when I was very young. I said I would like to act in martial arts films someday when I grow up, all that kind of thing. And while I was also performing with my family, with musical concerts and whatnot, you end up getting into musical theater and things like that. So I was in some professional productions. I had some formal training in drama school, things like that. I got myself a national diploma along the way. And for a time there, because I was so determined to pursue the kickboxing avenue, which I went on to do, not even like a conscious decision, but acting did just kind of go on ice for a while because I was so involved with the kickboxing.
Right.
But as I mentioned to you, especially before I was very lucky to get the opportunity to compete for Massimo Brizzi in the IKTA, kickboxing was very slow moving. So eventually I started doing both. A very well-known martial arts film journalist in the UK, Bruce Lee authority by the name of Andrew Staten. He would see me every year at the UK Martial Arts Show, which is the big show Hall of Fame we have here on an annual basis. And he would say, James, I haven't seen you in any films recently. What's going on? So he'd keep kind of poking the bear. He was trying to encourage me to do it, but he was doing it in a way where he was saying, I have not seen you in any films. And one year I had to say to him, yeah, you're right, Andrew. I've been busy with the kickboxing. I've just authored this book. I've not got around to it. So he said, James, tell you what, come with me. We're going to do an interview for the World of Martial Arts Television. And you're going to basically tell everybody how you're ready and raring to go in the martial arts film business. And so I went and did this interview with him.
Nice.
And just he got me right back in the saddle without too much, resistance. He just said, look, you've ended up putting this thing on ice. Come and speak with me on this interview and get the ball rolling. And a friend of mine, Nick Mancuso, you might be aware of, a very famous Canadian Grammy Award-winning actor, who starred in Stingray in the 80s, whereas he was driving around in a Corvette Stingray and using martial arts to fight the bad guys.
Yep.
He was a good friend of mine. And just coincidentally, around the same time, he was telling me, James, have you ever considered a career in film? And I said, well, just this past weekend, I had Andrew Staten trying to encourage me to do the same thing. And it is something I'm very passionate about, but I've just been so involved in my work and my training with the kickboxing. So Nick then basically took me on as a student, as an acting student. So I was able to do my acting lessons with Nick while continuing to train for my kickboxing fights. And then the film opportunities started coming in through people I was fortunate enough to know through martial arts and movies alike. Last year, I played the main fighting villain in the upcoming Dracula Rise of the Vampire, which was written and directed by my good friend Dean Meadows, who's a very accomplished filmmaker in his own right. And Matteo Scarfo, who like I say, award-winning filmmaker, has had movies released on DVD in the United States, Blu-ray, Amazon streaming, the whole 9 yards. He's Nick Mancuso's third cousin.
Oh, wow.
So Nick basically hooked me up with Matteo, and Matteo basically came up. The first thing we actually did was he wanted to make a medieval historical fantasy film for a long time. And when he met me, he decided, right, I'm going to shoot this thing, and James is going to be in the lead. So myself and my first instructor, I mentioned at the beginning of the show, Ian Moody, who's very, very interested in historical weaponry and the different fighting forms over the over the centuries, he came out with me and choreographed some fight scenes with me, and we did this medieval historical fantasy film out in Italy. We actually finished shooting that earlier in the year, called Restless Lands. I believe that's going to be coming out later in the year. And now, of course, we're working on The Butterfly, which is this martial arts action crime drama, where I'm the lead in that one as well. So it basically tells the story of a kickboxer who's embroiled in gang activity, and he's trying to break free, and him and his family just get away from the whole thing. But of course, there are some people who aren't so keen to see him leave that easily. So that's the film that I'm doing now. Yeah, that's currently in production, I should say, or in the works.
Do we have a ETA, hopeful ETA on that one, or?
Well, I'd love to say yes. In fact, as a matter of fact, I think if we would have spoken 2 or 3 months ago, I probably would have been maybe a little too confident in telling you when that may have been. But at the moment, of course, like so many, just the way of the world, unless you've got a big studio behind you, these days, it's often just a case of funding.
Yeah.
So we've shot enough footage to have a trailer go out to the public. So, of course, back in the day, what you would do is you would make a film, take segments of the film, form a trailer from the completed film, put that into theaters and say, or for your straight to VHS and say, here's a preview of the film that's coming out soon. But now, of course, we shoot a few key scenes. And the director, he put the trailer online. There's a crowdfunder currently in play.
Nice.
It's that's right. It's on GoFundMe. It's just The Butterfly, starring James Turner, directed by Matteo Scarfo. So people can donate to the project if they feel so inclined. So we're going to be shooting some more later in the year in September. And after that, I imagine we're probably going to look at a little bit more fundraising from that point. At the moment, it's very much a case of the script. It's the script development is still ongoing currently, but the outlay for the film is very much established, and it's very much in the process of being made steadily, but surely but slowly, I would say.
Yeah.
But there is some enthusiasm for it, a very enthusiastic following from the martial arts community and film buffs and whatnot. So we'll get there. Of course, the more people who are willing and generous enough to help, it may speed it up. But I'm sure we'll get there over the next 18 months or so. We're hoping to have this thing in the can and ready for release. Fingers crossed. Thank you.
Earlier, you mentioned teaching and some of your students. So do you have an actual school, or is it more like a one-on-one type thing you do?
Yeah, so I do offer one-on-ones, but as well as that, I actually teach at a martial arts center in Cornwall in the Southwest. It's called Absolute MMA. And basically one of my early martial arts instructors, a gentleman by the name of Mohammed M. Afzal, he's I remember I've fought and trained all over the world. And people like Sifu Ian Moody and Mohammed Afzal, I will say that these are top quality martial artists. So I was very lucky to have exposure to early on in my martial arts path as a youngster, right? And Master Afzal, I was currently at the time, I was just a few weeks away from fighting for the IKTA European title a couple of years ago. And he called me up. I was waiting in my car, just reading a book before my sparring session. My sparring partner was going to show up that night. I had a call out of the blue from Master Afzal, and he said, James, I'm starting this martial arts facility, and I want the top instructors of each disciplines in the southwest of England to come together under one roof and offer a martial art training experience for all. Would you be willing to be the kickboxing instructor? And bearing in mind, I'm a competitor. I've got the acting aspirations. I enjoy teaching, but it was not my primary motivation to be a teacher at that time. But because it was Master Afzal, or Abs as he's affectionately known, because he was asking me, I said, yes, Abs, I would love to do it. I would love to find a way to make it work. And as it happens, now we've established the class. And as we've been talking about throughout the show, on at least a local scale, we've developed an enthusiastic following for the sport of kickboxing, American full contact kickboxing. And to be honest, the greatest satisfaction for it, for doing it for me, is just helping people find an outlet, an activity through the martial arts that improves, in all honesty, every aspect of their lives. I mean, to me, I consider a lot of the people who came there were friends of mine who I'd known. They helped start the class rolling. People who I knew would just come and we start doing the classes. I'd be teaching them and they'd be bringing more and more friends along. And I've made other friends through them coming to the class. I don't view it as just kind of an autocratic, I teach people and take a paycheck and go home. For me, it's I enjoy doing it. Even with my busy schedule, I enjoy teaching the classes twice a week at Absolute MMA which are, they're mainly populated by recreational martial artists. I've got a couple of competitive kickboxers now.
Nice.
Who are doing well. But to me, I've discovered really what the true satisfaction of being a martial arts instructor is. You can see that you're helping give people something in their lives, which is a pursuit that enriches every aspect, from their contentment, their confidence, their outlook on all things. And of course, it becomes very obvious because you're thinking to yourself, well, yeah, this is why I do it as well. So if I can share this with other people, it seems the very least I can do to just give back to the people who support you as an actor, as an athlete. If you have the ability to parlay some of that magic dust of the martial arts to them as well and help them enrich their own lives, then, why wouldn't you, sort of thing.
Nice. So you mentioned having a few competitive kickboxers that you trained. So do you remember like that experience, the first time one of your students stepped into the cage? Was it nerve-wracking? What was going through your mind?
Yeah, it's a good question, because Master Afzal, as well as owning the school, the Absolute MMA Center that I teach at, he has been bringing back a show over the last couple of years, which was one of the pioneering MMA shows in the southwest of England, called XFC, which is Extreme Fighting Championship. So Master Afzal was actually one of the people who was instrumental in bringing the UFC to the UK the first time it was here.
Nice.
But concurrently at the same time, he had the XFC promotion, which he put on ice for several years, but he brought it back. And this time he said, well, look, I'm keen to have multiple disciplines on the show. It'll be in a cage. It'll have the MMA kind of appearance to it. But he said, why don't you bring your IKTA sanctioned kickboxing onto XFC, which I was more than happy to do. So as well as essentially sanctioning the fights on behalf of the IKTA in the UK, I also I was able to open the competitive outlet for some people who were looking to do it, who hadn't done it before. And one of them, my assistant instructor, is Dan Silliphant, who's been with me for many years. Just a very good friend of mine, has been followed my whole kickboxing journey. He's trained with me. He's been alongside the whole way. And his younger brother had started training with me in my classes about 5 years ago.
Okay.
And that was actually before we went to Absolute MMA. I had a smaller kind of private group for a few years before that even started up, just a once a week thing. And then, of course, with Absolute MMA Gym, it's kind of grown. I'm teaching twice a week, and it was a bigger facility, and it had all the things to really foster that environment if someone wanted to compete. And I quickly realized that Gary, Dan's younger brother, he had the itch to fight and test himself as a martial artist in that way. So I agreed to it. I made sure that he followed my protocol. I mean, he knew what he had coming for him, of course, because he had a copy of the book Full Contact Kickboxing, A Complete Guide to Training and Strategies, which I'd co-authored with Andy Dumas. And he knew that I was going to expect him to put in the work, the tried and tested methods of preparing for a kickboxing match. So he had to do his running in the morning. He had to do so many rounds in the gym in the evening, whether it be shadow boxing, hitting the bag, jump rope, etc. He had to do his sparring, conditioning. And when the time came, we went through the process. He was getting into the ring, and I'm in the corner for him and everything. And I think what your question was a good one, because you're absolutely right. It was a completely different sensation. All of a sudden, I'm not in the driving seat.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to sound egotistical, but I mean, everybody has adrenaline, and you should be alert, and everything's, your endorphins are flowing when you're ready to fight. But I don't get scared, nervous when I'm about to fight. I look forward to kickboxing because I enjoy it so much. But when Gary's about to fight, you got to check yourself for a second, because I'm not the one who's throwing the punches and the kicks now.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to just try to, have the confidence that he's prepared. I know he's done everything I've asked of him. I know he's not going to have any problems as such, but it's just those last moments where I realize I'm not the one throwing the punch and the kick. I'm not driving the car, essentially.
Yeah.
That's always a little bit of I'm not going to say nerve-wracking, but it's a different experience. It makes you a little bit less, you're more uneasy, in my opinion,
mm-hmm.
at least I was, than when I'm actually fighting myself, when I'm cornering someone else.
So are you like in the movie, was it Rocky V, when he's coaching and he's in the sidelines, like throwing punches, like
yeah,
he wishes he was in there?
Absolutely, yeah. It was Stallone in the corner there with Tommy Morrison,
there you go,
playing Tommy Gunn. But yes, right,
yep.
in the movie, very much so. It's like a vicarious thing, isn't it? It's a whole new experience, but I think it's teaching, and if you're able to also coach a martial arts student in some kind of competitive environment, I think it actually is an enriching thing for a martial artist to experience. It's something that's relatively new to me, training certainly competitive athletes. I've got a few years experience now of actually teaching people. Of course, I've authored the book, but I do believe that for your own martial arts development, it does actually make you a better martial artist to teach. Of course, I do believe that the motivations for teaching, they shouldn't be selfish. I mean, you should be genuinely wanting to help others and improve the abilities and give them something of value through your martial arts knowledge when you teach people. But I do genuinely believe that being forced to demonstrate and explain and maybe go further with students who don't understand or haven't quite grasped it as quickly as others, there's no question in my mind that you've got the added benefit that you're improving as a martial artist yourself by having to retread the steps of explaining and consolidating the fundamentals in your own mind. I think it's only good to be a martial arts instructor, in my opinion. So I would like to think and hope that it would just be conducive to the whole martial arts ethos of that you would share your knowledge with others and help others improve their lives through the martial arts.
Definitely. So we talked about the book a little bit, but kind of what led to it? What made you decide to become a writer?
Well, as I've mentioned, I'm a big hero worshiper. So through my kickboxing years, I had several frames of reference, kind of taking the lead from Bruce Lee, who I know had a vast library of books. He had everything from philosophy to nutrition to sports science, anything he could grab from up to that point, the early 70s. He had a reference source on everything. So I've always been, just from a very, very young age, without even really thinking about it, I'd always be a big reader. I had a collection of books by a Canadian boxing author by the name of Andy Dumas, who's a very prolific and successful boxing training author, boxing coach in Canada. His dad was the Canadian welterweight champion. That was back in the middle 20th century, Cliff Dumas Sr. And Andy's brother, Cliff Dumas Jr., is a prolific radio host himself, as a matter of fact. So nice. Andy, who has produced several books over the years, instructional videos. I mentioned his brother being the radio host. So Andy himself is very well spoken, presents himself well. Everything about his presentation style with the books, the training videos, I was drawn to it. I was a fan of Andy's work, and there was a lot of valuable information in terms of the boxing training protocols that he was using. I adopted to my kickboxing training. And I reached out to him, I think it was during the start of the COVID period, actually. Okay. And just explained to him that I was a fan of his work, and thank you for helping me in my own kickboxing career. I thought you might like to know that, an international kickboxing champion has found great value in your work. So thank you very much. We hit it off right off the bat. I mean, unsurprisingly, because I was drawn to his presentation style for a reason. We were like long lost brothers or something. So we had much in common and stayed in touch and everything else. And he came up with the idea. He said, well, James, do you think we could do a kickboxing book together? And I said, absolutely we could, because basically the kickboxing discipline that I love, the full contact American discipline of kickboxing, it is boxing with kicks above the waist. Mm-hmm. So I said, essentially, we could definitely together do this because you've got all the boxing knowledge. And I know that Andy does have some martial arts training as well. I said, we just lay it out as we would one of your boxing books. But we also have the context of now we're using 4 weapons instead of 2 with the hands. We've got the hands and the legs. And of course, I can contextually bring it to life with the history of the sport from the 70s to now, and just lay out kickboxing and present it to a first-time reader and introduce the sport and lay out, as the title says, the training and the strategies. And I was very honored to have a foreword written by Massimo Brizzi in Italy. He did that for me. Nice. And as well as that, I had help from Bill Wallace, Don Wilson, Ron Murray, Curtis Bush, Scott Ashley. Some of the greatest champions in the history of the sport actually helped with quotes that they provided for the book. And many of them have gone on to endorse the book publicly since then. I've got on YouTube, I posted some videos of myself stood with Bill Wallace and Don Wilson actually endorsing the book and saying, kickboxers, check this out. It's got some good information in here that you're going to find beneficial for your training. So it had a nice little kind of coming together of the kickboxing world, if you will. Like the pioneers were involved. I was very humbled and grateful that they endorsed it, because I kind of felt like it was like a come full circle project. As the 2020s were getting underway, there was this book that was, as the title says, Full Contact Kickboxing, a complete guide to training and strategies. It was this one source for the sport where everybody old and new came together and really did support the vision and the project. And I really have to thank Andy Dumas for giving me the opportunity and even to have the thought to do it, because I really took the project on with both hands. I was very passionate about it. And it was, again, purely just through being a fan of his work as a boxing author and by reaching out to him that I was able to do the book with him. Just as I reached out to Massimo Brizzi as a fan of his as a kickboxer, now I fight for him in his organization. So maybe that's a little lesson there to anybody who's listening. It's I certainly don't encourage people to be kind of, overly, you shouldn't be just reaching out to people and trying to use people to see what you can get out of them. Like,
right.
There are people in this world, we have givers and takers, and there are users and abusers and everything else. My reaching out to Massimo Brizzi, Andy Dumas, over the years, the kickboxers, Don Wilson, Curtis Bush, Ron Murray, people like this, it was always from just a place of fandom and appreciation. I just wanted to reach out to them and say, hello, you've inspired me as a martial artist, and now I'm doing my I'm following my martial arts path, and I'm also taking pleasure in inspiring people to do the same thing. So thank you very much. It was always just, I wanted to just reach out and show my appreciation to people. And I've been very fortunate that in many of these instances, they've given me tremendous opportunities to pursue my dreams in the martial arts. So I think the world, when you're looking to kind of give back and help the whole ecosystem keep moving, marvelous things can really happen. So I would encourage people out there, if you're passionate about a martial art, whatever it may, anything in life, don't be shy. Put yourself out there. And if you've got a genuine desire to perpetuate the vocation or the activity that you're into, you may well be surprised with what comes of it. So that would be my, if there's anything anybody takes from this interview today, maybe that's my thought for the day, as it were.
Well, for anyone with a marketing background, that's networking 101. It's about who you know.
Right.
So
right. Absolutely. Very true, sir. Yes.
Definitely made that one work. So nice.
Yeah, very much so.
So over your career, is there one philosophy you've learned that is at the top of your list?
Oh, that's a very good question. One philosophy above all. That I think there's probably several philosophical tenets that probably merge together that would form like an outlook that I have. But certainly a big one, just to cut down to the brass tacks, would be, it's the old saying, the late great fighter Andy Hoog, it became his kind of signature, which is never give up. If you really have a passion for something, I'd also like to bring in it was a song lyric, of course, by the great Jim Peterick, the songwriter for Survivor, the famous song "Eye of the Tiger." He says, "Don't lose your grip on the dreams of the past. You must fight just to keep them alive." Everybody at some point in their life, they find something that they have a love for, but a lot of the times life pulls you in various directions, and it's easy to lose sight of these things. So I would just encourage people, is if you're genuinely passionate about something, try to find a way to keep your foot in the door with that particular activity. You don't want to completely just shut the door on something because life's pulling in a different direction necessarily. If you really feel a passion for something, I would try to keep the door open. And also, if you're then in the position later on where, okay, I'm actively pursuing this thing that I love, whether it's being a kickboxer or an actor or a dancer or a car mechanic, whatever it might be, you're going to have setbacks along the way. It's the way life goes. You're going to have moments where things don't go as you expected. Your confidence might be knocked or whatever. You might feel at a low point and question your ability to be able to keep pursuing your goal or your ambition in this particular field. But at that point, I would encourage you to consider that it's these tests along the way. I've already listened to this podcast, the Brian Doucette Show, Everyday Martial Artist. I mean, as martial artists, what is it all about? What is the point of the belt grading system? You go up through the different colored belt ranks. It's meeting obstacles and overcoming them. Those are parallels for lessons we learn in life. We're always having spanners thrown in the works and obstacles set before us. So if you're at a point where you're struggling and questioning yourself whether you really want to pursue something, I would ask yourself, how important is it to you? How important is it to you to be satisfied in yourself and to set an example to others that mean a lot to you? I would encourage you to, if it's something that you've really hung your hat on and it's something that you're passionate about, I would encourage you to never give up. Find a way, whatever that means to you, to just keep going. And that's a philosophy for me for martial arts, whether it's competition, whether it's a project you're trying to achieve in life or in life itself. I would say those three magic words, never give up. They can get you up off the floor before the 10 count, that's for sure. So,
Nice.
yeah, just a very good, challenging question there, Brian. But being put on the spot, what's like number one philosophy? The one that comes to mind for me, I'm going to have to say, is never give up.
I like it.
Thank
All right.
you.
How about worst martial arts related injury?
Ooh, I've been rather fortunate because as a professional kickboxer, of course, you get the bumps, the bruises, things like that. I've never had some of the more commonly associated ones. So I've never had any teeth knocked out. I've never had a broken jaw, a broken nose. I've never had a broken rib, to my knowledge. So, I mean, I do prioritize defense. I mean, every kickboxer, if you take kickboxing in training or in competition, you're going to get hit. Everybody gets hit. We're not Superman. It's just Bill Superfoot Wallace who's able to retire undefeated.
Yeah.
Everybody else, we all have losses on our record somewhere, even if, however many titles we win. But everybody gets hit. Even Bill, from time to time, he would get hit with the odd jab, let's say, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So that's true. The key point is to make sure you don't get hit with your opponent's best shot on the chin. People talk about the strength of a fighter's chin or his jaw.
Mm-hmm.
His ability to take a punch is going to dictate how much of an effective fighter he is. Well, the truth of it is anybody's chin can be cracked. Even if someone you might think, oh, he seems to go over a bit more easily. That guy seems to take a better punch. Well, one day, the right punch is going to land at the right moment and take a guy out if it lands square on the jaw or in the chin. So you always protect your chin, you protect your vital areas, you protect your body, keep your elbows into the body, hands up by the chin area. So even though I get hit just like any other kickboxer, I don't take those brutal, devastating blows in the key areas and then the guy's able to follow up with another 2 or 3 shots, let's say. If I get hit, I go into a defensive position, I pivot, I move, I reestablish, I put my jab out there on my side kick, and I go again. So even when I'm attacking, prioritizing defense first and offense second, that's really a cornerstone philosophy for directly talking about combat tactics, I would say. But in terms of the injuries, I would say the worst one I've had was I basically had a hematoma in my left calf muscle, which essentially it burst. Yeah. So it was kind of, it's tantamount really to a ripped calf, but it was actually similar to the injury that Bill Wallace had that Elvis Presley helped him cure in the mid-70s, that famous story where he couldn't walk, couldn't point his toes. I had that particular injury as well. And for a time there, it rendered me for 6 weeks unable to walk, unable to, at that point, I've never had a broken leg, but I mean, it put me in the same position in terms of functionality of having a broken leg. So, you can't run, you can't kick, anything else. Just incidentally, I'd like to mention quickly, is one of the reasons I'm a proponent of full contact kickboxing, as well as it being exciting, is if you look at, obviously in MMA, you've seen it in Thai boxing, you've seen it in K1 rules. Once in a while, a fighter will throw a low roundhouse kick, which incidentally, low roundhouse kicks are not allowed in full contact kickboxing. All kicks have to be above the waist. But you'll see these guys, they throw a low roundhouse kick. Even though they got boxing gloves on their hands, they've got no protection on their shin, no protection on their foot, and they'll make contact with the other guy. They block or check the kick, and the shins clash, and the kicker manages to snap his leg in half at the tibia bone. They break their shin. Sorry if that makes you bristle, listeners, but I'm just trying to hit home the fact that, they get a broken tibia bone out of it. So to me, one of the values of full contact kickboxing as a competitive sport, the injuries are relatively minor overall. I mean, yes, we've got boxing gloves on, we can use boxing techniques, we can use kicks, but those I do feel as far as the professional combat sports go, full contact kickboxing is one of the better ones as far as care for the athletes. We have the 2-minute rounds, which you're able to fight hard for 2 minutes, go back to your corner, sit down, get your water, and you can reassess in the corner. You got a pretty good idea on a regular interval of how your athlete's doing. If you're working the corner, you can keep good tabs on them and make sure they're not going to go out there repeatedly and take more damaging blows. They're going to exacerbate injuries. You have more opportunity to honorably pull your fighter out of a bad situation if you need to, if an injury risk is a real threat. And because of the shin guards, the kick boots, and the kicks above the waist, ironically, the things that I believe, it makes the sport maybe seem a little bit less hardcore, quote unquote, compared to, let's say, MMA. Ultimately, I think as martial artists, we recognize that there's great value to that. It's more accessible. The June Ree safety equipment was the kind of pioneering foray into that equipment in point fighting right as full contact was coming in 1973, 74. One of my heroes, obviously, you're very aware of him, John Longstreet from Minnesota. He's always said the more equipment you have on, the better off you are. Yeah. And this is coming from a full contact world champion. So just food for thought on the injuries thing. But yeah, that would be the worst one. It was a bit of a fluke. I don't really know how you avoid that one. But yeah, the hematoma in the calf muscle, not a pleasant injury. But since we're on the air, Brad, could I ask you quickly what your worst injury in the martial arts was?
I'm kind of like you. I've been very lucky. I mean, I've had a broken toe, a fractured knuckle, sprained ankle. As far as martial arts, that's really about it. I mean, I had all those. I forgot to mention those. I guess maybe we're kind of lucky, but I had all those too. Yeah. But I had I tore my tricep lifting weights, which affected my martial arts. And I've told many times on the episode, my worst overall injury ever was from playing kickball in high school. I blew out my lateral meniscus and my ACL the day before my 16th birthday. My leg bent like 45 degrees the wrong direction, and I've never had it repaired, never had it rebuilt. So that's actually that's actually affected my martial arts career most of my life.
I'll bet. Yeah.
As far as actual in martial arts, I mean, I fractured the knuckle breaking a board, broke the toe trying to break a board. I did. I think I sprained a wrist one time. We were doing in a traditional Taekwondo class, we were doing this technique where you're going back and forth with a partner and they're throwing punches and we're blocking it. And then my partner just threw a perfect punch and I threw a perfect block and our wrist just connected. And I like sprained my wrist doing that. And so
ironic, isn't it? On a defensive action. So
exactly.
In a self-defense situation, you saved yourself from getting punched in the mouth. But, I guess maybe that's like the lesser of two evils. Sometimes in self-defense, if we're able to get away from the situation, ourselves, our families, our loved ones, friends are protected and we escape the situation, it's unrealistic to think that we may come away always completely unscathed. And what a visceral example, just a training injury of perfectly executing a self-defense technique, and sometimes you're going to get a little niggle, as they say, a little injury out of it.
But luckily for me, I've always had an extremely high tolerance for pain. I mean, you were talking about like shots to the jaw. I remember one time training in class, I was helping teach a class and I was holding targets for this gentleman who was either yellow belt or green belt, and he was doing turning sidekick. And we did like 5 in a row, and then out of nowhere, he threw a backspin or spinning hook kick without thinking about it. And I took it right in the jaw, barefoot, as hard as he kicked. And my instructor run over. I'm like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "I'm fine, sir." And I was like ready to hold the target. He's like, "Are you sure?" It's like, "You should be unconscious. That was a hard." I'm like, "I'm fine, sir. It really didn't hurt."
Yeah, wow.
So I've been lucky.
Ladies and gentlemen, your host is one tough guy. I'll just say that.
Well, that was 30 years ago. I don't know if I could take that same kick now, but.
I tell you, absolutely. It is interesting how those things come to bear, isn't it? Because sometimes you just find out through training, and also it's when you're a competitor and you're getting in the ring, it helps at a certain point. You don't have blatant disregard for your own safety.
Right.
Because that is, like I say, that's going to affect your fighting style to the point where you're not going defense first, offense second. But you also can't be petrified about getting hit and hurt because you'd never get in there in the first place. So there's a part of you, and it's something you got to kind of control. But the fighter who's really got that dialed in mindset, there's a part of him where, it's almost like you eat junk food when you know you shouldn't. A part of you would like to take a shot and just eat it and go, "Oh yeah, see, I can take that shot. I'm tough. You're not going to be able to hurt me." Now, because that helps you as a fighter. If you're getting in there and you're ready for some rock'em sock'em, you're in a good place mentally, ready to fight. Just make sure you don't get hit on the chin or right in the liver clean or on the solar plexus or on the temple or on a vital spot where it's going to put you down.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're forced to take a shot at a certain point, don't dwell on it. Just go, ha, and you hit them right back. That's the idea as a kickboxer. If you can marry those two up, be defensively responsible, but certainly don't be scared of getting hit as well. That's kind of that perfect marriage that when I walk into the ring, that's where I find I'm ready to go. So as your very prestigious guest Rick Rufus once said, you bet your bottom dollar I'm coming to win. That's the philosophy by the time you get in there, you know?
Nice. Yeah. So do you have, obviously around here, kickboxing is big, so I've only watched like 3 kickboxing matches in my life live and in person. But do you, with MMA, do you have walk-up music? Is there a song that you play as you're walking into the ring?
Yeah, I've had a few actually. So a big one for me was the Enter the Dragon theme with Bruce Lee. I mean, I'm known in kickboxing as James the Dragon Turner. There's various. I mean, obviously, I come from a Jeet Kune Do background, so Bruce Lee was my initial martial arts hero. So the Dragon was just a term that naturally fit. Obviously, Don the Dragon Wilson. I'm a big Don Wilson fan, so I talked about him a lot as I was getting into kickboxing in my teen years, and people just started calling me, James the Dragon. And I ran that by him once because I said, Don, you've probably seen on Facebook and stuff, people calling me James the Dragon Turner. I apologize. And he said, no, James, you should take that mantle. You should use it. So what an honor from him.
Nice.
That he endorsed that. And also Massimo Brizzi, as I mentioned, my modern kickboxing hero from Italy. He wore trousers these long pants that had dragon written right down the side. So I thought he was also called the Dragon. I was happy to go along with it. Of course, with English and Italian, there's a bit of a language barrier there. He's actually known as the Iceman. Which I didn't realize. So I went along with being called the Dragon. He was one of the reasons why I was keen to embrace the nickname as well. But it wasn't actually even his nickname at all. But that's just one of those things. So all of those reasons were why for a long time I used the Enter the Dragon theme, which I still use periodically. But I also want another theme song that I like to use was, the theme song to I mentioned it earlier, the 80s action TV show Stingray, starring my good friend Nick Mancuso.
Nice.
The theme song to that show was written by Mike Post and Pete Carpenter, who did several famous themes like Rockford Files, Magnum P.I. They just are great at doing these iconic, memorable theme songs. So I'm a Corvette driver myself, and as a tribute to Nick, I like to walk to the ring often using the Stingray theme as well. So if you come into a James Turner fight, you can flip a coin. It's either going to be Enter the Dragon or the Stingray theme.
I like it. Those are 2 no one's ever said before, so I like it a lot.
Oh,
that's
okay,
cool.
Great. Yeah,
nice. Yeah. All right, how about 3, 4, 5 names you'd put on your personal Mount Rushmore of martial arts?
Yeah, Brian, I knew this one was coming, and it's a tough question for me because, as I mentioned, I'm a hero worshiper. So I've had to try to categorize it just to make it easier on myself. So I've gone with, in my realm, we're talking kickboxing champions who I've been lucky enough to call my own friends. So these are top guys, definitely Mount Rushmore worthy, who have been big influences on me personally in my direction in life. Good friends of mine. They're still alive as well because, some people we've sadly lost as time has gone on, especially over the last few years. So names that immediately come to mind for me, I've just been talking about Massimo Brizzi from Italy, Don Wilson, Curtis Bush, big kickboxing hero friend of mine, as is Ron Murray, Jason Vassallo from England, who I haven't mentioned yet. I believe the greatest English kickboxing world champion we've ever had. Bill Wallace, there's 6. I'd like to mention John Longstreet, Rick Rufus, Scott Ashley, Benny Urquidez. It goes on and on, but it's tough to keep it just to 5. For my Mount Rushmore, man, I tell you, that is one clogged up mountain at this point. But there's a few names out there that our listeners, if you're unfamiliar with any of those, by all means, please do look them up. If I can just give a shout out to any of those legends who inspired me, I'd be happy to do so.
Definitely. I've actually been trying to get John Longstreet on the show, so
I'd love to hear it. I haven't spoke to John for a few years. I think I don't know if he's on Facebook still. Please do say hello from me if you're able to make contact with him. I'd love to hear him on an episode of Everyday Martial Artist.
Will do. Fantastic. Awesome. All right. Now, other than your own favorite martial arts book.
Okay. Yeah. Great question. Favorite martial arts book. Ooh, just the one. I'm going to go a little bit out of the realm of martial arts instructional as such, because of course that's right in my wheelhouse. I've just done one. There are other great ones as well. Mine's not the only one. But I'd say a big inspiration martial arts book to me, a big inspirational book, would be The Secret to Inner Strength by Chuck Norris, which was published in the 80s. Yeah. That was, I don't know if you've read that one. That was a really great. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So actually, I think I do believe I've heard you mention before, actually, that you have read it. Yeah. So I'm sure you'll agree. That's a pillar martial arts book. that I would recommend any martial artist to read. So that one, I think, to put on a pedestal, I'd have to throw that one out there. The Secret to Inner Strength by Chuck Norris.
Yeah, I believe that's probably one of the first 3 or 4 martial arts books I ever actually bought myself with my own money.
Oh, great.
So yeah,
wow,
I remember that. But how about a favorite martial arts video game?
Ooh, martial arts video game. Man, there are some good ones. I do. I don't get to play video games very often, but I am a fan of several of them. I guess a favorite of mine, a personal favorite, I'd have to say, it didn't do very well when it came out in terms of some of the critics' reactions to it, but I thought it was great. There was in 2002, there was Bruce Lee Quest of the Dragon, which you got to play as Bruce Lee in a kind of martial arts. It was like an Enter the Dragon style setting. It was very much in the vein of that. You basically played through a story of a movie that could have been a Bruce Lee film if he had lived, Yeah. And my very good friend Curtis Bush did motion capture for that film as well.
Nice.
So he was one of the villains that, as Bruce, you fight later in the game. So one of the greatest kickboxers of all time is doing the motion capture for it, So that's a really cool thing. But there are several of them. There was the game Streets of Rage on the Sega Mega Drive. Me and my friends hold that near and dear to our hearts. That was great fun. You just basically go through the streets doing karate techniques and take everybody else and playing as Axel.
Nice.
There was actually a kickboxing game in the early 90s. It was Derek Panzer's Kickboxing was originally the game that was released, and then it was slightly re-engineered the following year, and it was released as, I think, on the Sega Mega Drive as a Sega Genesis. It was called The Kickboxing. And in some areas, it was Best of the Best Championship Karate was the other title for it in some regions. And it was. They didn't have real fighters in the game, but you basically created your own kickboxer and fought through the ranks, and it was all very much by the rules. You kicked above the waist, used punching techniques. You fought for 9 rounds, let's say. So that was like an early simulation, you could say, back when the sport was still kind of making some waves. They tried to make a little video game out of it. So that's a notable game as well. Sorry, cool. Brian, I know you asked me for one.
I know, but 3. I've never heard of that one, so that's cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's those are a few that come to mind for me. And all of these things, especially when you got video games, in your formative years, when you're interested in something, if there's video games, if there's music videos that features the thing you're interested in, it all kind of encourages the passion for what you do, doesn't it? So
definitely.
It's all cool stuff. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. How about a favorite martial arts TV show?
Favorite martial arts TV show? Well, I mentioned Stingray earlier. I mean, I think it would be, I don't know if it would be fair to categorize that purely as a martial arts TV show. It has martial arts in it. I mean, it's obviously a favorite martial arts TV show of mine. I mean, it starred my acting teacher. So instrumental in my life. I love it. Stingray. There's no TV show I love more than Stingray. I can say that.
That's awesome.
But as far as, I guess you could argue, because it's Chuck Norris and he's predominantly known before he was an actor as a martial artist, as an accomplished champion. Walker, Texas Ranger, I guess I'd say. I think you could qualify that as a martial arts show.
I would say so.
And there was, I don't know if you remember the Legends episode where he had all the kickboxers in one episode. So you had Joe Louis, Don Wilson, Bill Wallace. They're all there. You had the contemporary fighters of, say, 2001, I think, when it was filmed, and the legends of the 70s, the 80s, and 90s. They were all there in the same episode. So that alone would qualify it, I think. But I sat through all 8 seasons of Walker, Texas Ranger more than once when I was a kid into a teenager. So I'd have to give that one number 1, I think. There are some great ones, but gun to the head, you got one. I mean, it's got to be Walker, isn't it?
Yeah,
it has to be.
It's a lot of people pick that one, so yeah.
Sure, there you go.
So have you watched any of the current ones that have been out, like in the last 5-6 years?
Yeah, I have not got around to it.
Okay.
It's a funny thing. It's not the current Walker shows. To me, I guess I'm a bit of an old soul, an old head, but to me, the proliferation of remakes for everything.
I just meant any of the current martial arts TV, not the remake. I mean things like Into the Badlands, Warrior, Cobra Kai, any of those.
Yeah, Cobra Kai is one that my friends, given my sensibilities and my interest, they say, James, I cannot believe you sat through Cobra Kai yet. They're all telling me I've got to get round to it. I guess maybe if we do a follow-up in some time down the line, I guess I'm obligated to let you know what I thought of Cobra Kai, because I've not got around to the more modern shows yet. But I like the idea of distant sequels. sequels. It's just my opinion.
Yeah.
But there are so many movies and TV shows that are done now as remakes.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there was talk of doing Enter the Dragon. It's like, well, you don't have Bruce Lee.
Yeah, no.
I mean, how you remake Enter the Dragon? It's literally called Here Comes Bruce Lee. That's what Enter the Dragon means. Yeah. You can't remake that. So in my opinion, so that's why the concept of Cobra Kai to me is very interesting, because it's the same characters done years later. And I know it's somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but I believe as the stories and the episodes and the seasons have continued, the drama heightens and it's got people really invested. So I like the idea of distant sequels, because you're being reverent to the past. There's something about the phrase, remake. To me, it almost means like, well, we're redoing it to... I know it's not always implicit, but the idea, it seems to come across as it's like you're trying to like redo it to replace the original one. It's like, I'm not a big fan of the concept of remakes. I like distant sequels, we'll say.
Yeah, I know. I finally brought myself to watch the remake of Roadhouse, and was not impressed.
Right, absolutely.
Did not like
you get
it.
Benny Urquidez choreographing Patrick Swayze in 1989. I'm going to take that every day of the week.
Yes.
Over, no offense, Conor McGregor, but I'll leave it at that.
It's just not the same. 100%. No, so, all right. How about a favorite martial arts movie?
Yeah, I mean, it's, again, so just go with the one. I mean, Enter the Dragon, we just talked about it. I mean, it is kind of the centerpiece martial arts film that inspired so many of us. But I think I'd like to take this opportunity to give a little bit of recognition to a couple of others, because I have favorite martial arts movies as well as Enter the Dragon would be the easy answer. So, I mean, obviously I'm a big fan of Don Wilson. Several of his films I'm a big fan of. One in particular that he did was called Blood Fist 2, which is one of my favorites. Yeah, the second Blood Fist is interesting because his character, he's basically playing himself. He's Jake the Dragon Ray, the world light heavyweight kickboxing champion, and he ends up getting essentially kidnapped with a bunch of other martial arts champions who are also real life guys who are acting in the movie, and they get taken to an island fortress and they're forced to fight each other. So it's kind of like Enter the Dragon. You had real life martial arts champions like Jim Kelly and Peter Archer and Bob Wall. And in Blood Fist 2, you've got James Waring, Maurice Smith, Richard Hill. Those are all kickboxers. Timothy Baker was in there as well, the karate champion. And they are in this island fortress and they got to fight each other. So while not being a remake as such, it's not called Enter the Dragon. It's not as crass as just we're redoing it. It's a film that's inspired by Enter the Dragon, starring Don the Dragon Wilson. So that's absolutely, one of my total favorite martial art films. I love all Don Wilson's films, but that's one that I like to draw attention to because it might get lost in the shuffle a bit because it's Blood Fist 2. Yeah. You wouldn't think out of 8 of them, you might not, draw individual attention to that one. So I like that one.
That makes sense. Cool.
Yeah. The other one I'll mention today is American Kickboxer, starring my good friend John Barrett.
Yeah.
And Keith Vitale's in that one as well. It's like, as far as a movie representation goes of the sport of kickboxing, I hope we can do a fraction as well in The Butterfly. And John Barrett himself has been, as has Don Wilson, but John Barrett has been very encouraging and very supportive of the Butterfly project as it's coming to fruition. So
nice.
We'll certainly do our best. But yeah, guys and girls listening, we're recording this on a Saturday. It's going to come out a little bit later, I'm sure. But the next opportunity you get on a Friday, Saturday night, I strongly encourage start with either American Kickboxer 1 or Blood Fist 2, and you won't regret it.
I like it.
Okay.
All right. How about, doesn't have to be a martial arts movie, any movie you've ever seen, favorite movie fight scene?
Oh, wow. Okay. Favorite movie fight scene. I'm being terrible with this criteria because I'm not good at just narrowing it down to just one. Because, I mean, you can't top Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris, first of all.
In the Coliseum, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Likewise, how do you top Chuck Norris and Bill Wallace in A Force of One?
Yep.
Right? I mean, that's another thing about favorite martial arts films. I just ran right past that. That one easily qualifies as a favorite martial arts film as well, of course. So that's a great one. As far as a Don Wilson fight scene goes, I'm bringing up Blood Fist 2 again. At the end of that film, he fights Maurice Smith in the climactic final showdown. That is an on-screen rematch of a world title fight in Tokyo in 1983. Don Wilson won a decision over 11 rounds where they fought in real life. So in 1990, they fought in the climactic fight scene of Blood Fist 2 7 years later. So that one has extra significance to me. 2 world kickboxing champions squaring off at the end of the film. So there you go. There's my big 3. You asked for 1. I apologize. Okay. We've got a podium. Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris and Bill Wallace. So Chuck's in 2 of them. And Don Wilson and Maurice Smith. I could go on. I'll stop there, as the saying goes.
All right.
Thank you.
My final question has nothing to do with martial arts, but I know you mentioned you were getting into acting and stuff, and you did like musical theater. So what's the favorite musical theater production you've been in?
Okay, the favorite one I've been in. I would have to say the most significant one that I've done, it was Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. So I was young and I was in the ensemble for it, but it was the professional touring production. And, I was young and it was really the first, I guess, performing that I had done of any significance that, like a professional setting. I went on to act on TV. I was in a sitcom with Dawn French that was on BBC television a few years later. And now, of course, I've acted in feature films. So, but that, I guess, would have to be the most significant musical theater production I did. I mean, my wheelhouse of music is 80s, AOR, melodic rock, West Coast. It goes on and on. But as far as the musical theater goes, which was a part of my formative development as a performer, because I mean, martial arts is performance as well, let's be honest. Yes. So yeah, I'd have to give credit to, that was the one, Joseph, the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. That would be, that's my favorite one that I did, I guess you could say.
I love that. And I love that show because all three of my kids are theater kids. I've talked about it before on the show, but my oldest son, the first big theater production I ever saw when he was in 4th grade, he had just done 101 Dalmatians or something like that. Oh, wow, but they came home with this slip about this summer performing arts school for high school kids, but they were doing Joseph that summer, and they wanted 26 little kids to be in the kids choir for Joseph. So he's like, can I audition for this? And he auditioned, and we went at this big outdoor amphitheater, probably 2,000 people in the audience and stuff. Wow. And he was up there for like 12 shows as like a 4th or 5th grader. And
isn't that amazing? That's
what he got hooked. He got hooked on it. And of course, his brother and sister followed him.
Oh, fantastic. That's awesome, Brian. I mean, my brother is still my slightly younger brother. I mean, I'm 34. My brother's now 30, which is hard to believe. I call him my younger brother, but he's still doing it. He actually went and studied it at university level, and he's still doing it. Professional and amateur shows locally to this day. He's still very much involved in musical theater. So, it runs in the family, I guess.
Yeah, literally just last night went to my daughter's senior high school play, and my middle son is a junior at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City for acting. And he's actually this weekend filming a Star Wars fan film that he auditioned for. So, really? Wow. So yeah, my kids stay busy.
Yeah, that's wonderful stuff. Congratulations to you all. I mean, that's what a great thing for the family. You're all getting out there and doing the thing, as they say.
Yeah, they keep us busy and keep us running around. So
amazing, brilliant stuff. Yeah, seriously,
man, this has been so much fun, James. I mean, I feel like we could keep talking for another 2-3 hours. We definitely. I'd love, if you ever come to the U.S., I'd love to meet you in person someday and sit down and talk and have a 3-hour conversation probably. But
yeah, well, I'm always the optimist, so I certainly hope and maybe even dare I say expect that it'll happen someday. And like I say, look forward to the next time where we can shoot the breeze with martial arts and everything else.
Definitely. But before I let you go, is there anything that last minute that I forgot to ask you, or we just want to be sure to mention it? And I will put links for your IMDb, for your Absolute MMA, for your book on Amazon, anything else you need me to put links for, just let me know.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just all I'd like to say really is thank you to all of my friends in the martial arts for all your support over the years. As I always try to relay, I really do appreciate it. And my victories in kickboxing and successes that I've been fortunate to experience, they're as much for you as they are for me, because I really appreciate all of your support. And other than that, yes, please do. The current project, like I say, is the Butterfly movie. Mm-hmm. So please do keep an eye out for that. I hope you like it, because I'm sure many of our listeners listening to everyday martial artists, we're all film fans. So get on board with the Butterfly if you'd like to, and we hope to bring you some solid martial arts action entertainment. I'm
looking forward to it. So as soon as you know a release date, you let me know and I'll start talking about it. But I truly appreciate your time. This has been a blast, man.
And you, my friend. Thank you very much, Brian. I look forward to the next time.
Thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist. We hope you will join us every week for a brand new episode with a different martial artist telling their story. If you enjoy the show, be sure to leave us a review. Also, be sure to check out our website at everydaymartialartist.com. There you can find all of our episodes and contact us to suggest guests and ask questions. Again, thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist, and we'll see you next week.
This podcast is a production of Unfiltered Studios. If you would like to know more about joining Unfiltered Studios, please visit our website at unfpod.com for more information.